You would think, you would honestly think that after winning the election, the panic would stop, right? I mean, that was the whole point. That was the strategy. Delay, 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 win the election, and make the federal cases disappear. And it worked. The Department of Justice is already packing up. Jack Smith is winding down. The threat of prison for all intents and purposes is gone. Donald Trump is about to walk back into the Oval Office a free man. So why is he still acting like a fugitive? If you want to understand what is actually happening inside Mar-a-Lago right now, do not listen to the victory speeches. Do not look at the cabinet picks. Look at what his lawyers are doing when they think no one is paying attention. Because on December 2nd, weeks after the election was called, Trump's legal team filed an emergency motion in the Southern District of Florida. An emergency. And I want to be really specific about this because the language here matters. They didn't just ask for a delay. They didn't just ask for a schedule change. They filed an emergency motion urging Judge Aileen Cannon, the same judge who is bent over backward to protect him at every single turn, to permanently block the release of Special Counsel Jack Smith's report. They are arguing that the American people, the voters who just put him back in office, should never, ever be allowed to see the evidence Jack Smith collected. They claim that releasing this report, quote, would perpetuate unlawful investigations. I'm sorry, but what? This is the part where you have to stop and ask yourself if we are all living in the same reality. Because for 3 years, what have we heard? We have heard that this was a witch hunt. We have heard it was a hoax. We have heard that the evidence was fake, the boxes were empty, and the surveillance tapes were perfect. If that were true, if Jack Smith spent millions of dollars and 2 years finding absolutely nothing, then why is Donald Trump terrified of you seeing the report? Think about it. If I were accused of a crime I didn't commit and the prosecutor wrote a final report saying, "We looked everywhere and found nothing," I wouldn't file an emergency motion to hide it. I would laminate it. I would put it on a billboard. I would want every single person in this country to read it because it would be the ultimate vindication. But Donald Trump isn't doing that. He is doing the exact opposite. He is fighting to bury this document with more intensity than he fought the actual charges. And that tells you everything. It tells you that the Smith dossier isn't a nothing burger. It tells you that Jack Smith didn't just sit in a room for 2 years, he brought receipts. We are talking about witness testimony, grand jury transcripts, and the specific chronological details of how the President of the United States allegedly obstructed justice to hide national secrets. Trump knows that if this report leaks, if the public actually sees what is in those files, the narrative of the innocent victim evaporates instantly. He knows he can't spin the raw evidence, so his only play left is to run back to Judge Cannon and beg her to lock the door and throw away the key. This isn't the behavior of a winner. It's the behavior of a man who knows the truth is sitting in a PDF file on a court server, and he is desperate to hit delete before history gets a chance to read it. And look, I don't want you to just take my word for it. We don't do that here. We look at the receipts. We look at the actual filings. Because when you strip away the cable news chyron and actually read what these lawyers are submitting to the court, the desperation doesn't just jump off the page, it screams. Let's look at what they are trying to hide. We are not talking about abstract legal theories here. We are talking about the Corcoran notes. Remember Evan Corcoran? He was Trump's own attorney. He was the guy Trump allegedly lied to, trying to get him to hide documents from the FBI. Those notes are likely detailed in full in Smith's report. Trump's team is terrified that you will read in black and white how the former president allegedly instructed his lawyer to pluck classified documents out of a folder and make a plucking motion implying they should disappear. They are trying to hide the surveillance footage timeline. The report almost certainly breaks down, minute by minute, how Walt Nauta, Trump's body man, moved boxes out of the storage room just days before the DOJ came to look for them. They are trying to hide the pool shed incident. Remember the IT worker? The one who was allegedly asked to delete security server logs? The report will likely detail exactly who gave that order and when. This is the forensic evidence that Trump's team calls unfair. They call it unfair because it is irrefutable. If this case had gone to trial, a jury would have seen all of this. They would have seen the photos of boxes spilling onto the floor of the Mar-a-Lago ballroom. They would have heard the audio recording from Bedminster, you know the one, where Trump is literally waving a classified war plan around and saying on tape, "As president, I could have declassified, but now I can't." That audio recording alone destroys his entire defense. And Jack Smith's report likely contextualizes that recording with witness testimony we haven't even heard yet.
Let's dig into the specifics of this December 2nd motion, because the legal argument they are making is, frankly, astounding. In the filing, United States v. Trump, Southern District of Florida, Trump's attorneys aren't just asking for a courtesy redaction. They are arguing that the Department of Justice violates the Constitution simply by writing down what happened. They claim that the release of Jack Smith's report would, and I'm quoting here, violate the Justice Manual and unfairly target a defendant whose case is being dismissed. Let's break that down. First of all, the existence of this report is not some deep state conspiracy, it is literally the law. Under 28 CFR 600.8c, the federal regulation that governs special counsels, Jack Smith is required to provide a confidential report explaining the prosecution or declination decisions to the Attorney General. He has no choice. It is part of the job description. So when Trump's team screams that writing this report is unlawful, they are lying. They are hoping you don't know how the special counsel statute works. They are hoping you believe that accountability is a form of harassment. But here is where it gets interesting. Under those same regulations, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, has the discretion to release that report to the public if it is in the public interest. And historically, it almost always is. We saw the Mueller report. We saw the Durham report, which, by the way, Trump loved because he thought it would help him. So why is this specific report different? Why is this the one that must be sealed in a lead box and dropped into the Marianas Trench? Because of the evidence. And we know what that evidence looks like because we saw the indictment before Judge Cannon stalled it into oblivion.
So when you see this motion filed on December 2nd, understand what you are looking at. You are looking at a legal team that knows the facts are fatal. They know that if the American people see the full narrative, not the snippets, but the comprehensive 400-page summary of how Donald Trump allegedly compromised national security for his own ego, it becomes impossible to pretend this was a political persecution. And that is why they are not appealing to the law. They are appealing to Judge Aileen Cannon. They filed this motion in her court specifically because they know how she operates. They know she isn't looking at 28.CFR.600.8. They know she is looking for any excuse, any procedural hook to protect the man who appointed her. They are asking her to overrule the Attorney General's authority to release a report that belongs to the public. It is a desperate Hail Mary pass to suppress the truth. And the craziest part? They might actually get away with it if we don't call it out for exactly what it is. But if you think this is just about one report or one judge or one emergency filing in December 2025, you are missing the forest for the trees. Because what we are watching play out in Judge Cannon's courtroom right now is not an isolated incident. It is not a glitch in the system. It is a feature. This is the playbook. We have seen this movie before, and we know exactly how it ends. If you take a step back and look at the timeline of Donald Trump's entire political career, you realize that this December 2nd filing is just the latest verse in the same old song. The strategy never changes. Suppress the evidence, delay the truth, and then claim total exoneration based on the silence you created. Let's rewind. Let's go back to 2019. Do you remember the Mueller report?
I want you to really remember that moment because it is the blueprint for what is happening right now with Jack Smith. Robert Mueller spent 2 years investigating Russian interference. He found 10 distinct instances of obstruction of justice. 10. He laid them out in excruciating detail. But what happened before the American people got to see that report? Bill Barr happened. Trump's Attorney General stepped in and released a 4-page summary that completely sanitized the findings. He spun the narrative before the truth could put its boots on. He told the world there was no collusion and no obstruction, creating a media firestorm of vindication that lasted for weeks. By the time the actual redacted report came out, showing that Trump had tried to fire Mueller, intimidate witnesses, and shut down the investigation, the narrative was already set. The cement had dried. Trump had already claimed victory. He learned a valuable lesson in 2019. The facts don't matter if you can control the release of primary source material. If you can bury the primary source material, you can invent whatever reality you want. And that is exactly what he is trying to do with the Jack Smith report. The only difference is
He doesn't have Bill Barr right now. He doesn't have an attorney general to run interference for him yet. So he found a substitute. He found Judge Aileen Cannon. And this is where the pattern becomes undeniable. We cannot talk about this motion to bury the report without talking about the judge who is entertaining it. Because Judge Cannon's behavior in this case hasn't just been unusual, it has been a systematic dismantling of the judicial process.
From the very beginning, she has acted as a shield. Remember the special master debacle? When the FBI first raided Mar-a-Lago and found boxes of top-secret documents in the bathroom, Judge Cannon stepped in and essentially froze the investigation. She appointed a special master to review the documents, a move so legally unsound that the conservative 11th Circuit Court of Appeals had to step in and smack it down. They didn't just overrule her, they humiliated her. They wrote a ruling that basically said, you cannot create a special lane of justice just because the defendant is a former president. But she didn't stop. She delayed. She entertained frivolous motions. She pushed the trial date back and back and back until it ran out the clock on the election. This wasn't incompetence. This was the strategy. Trump's legal team knows that Judge Cannon is the weak link in the federal judiciary, and they are exploiting it ruthlessly. They know she is willing to entertain arguments that any other judge would laugh out of court. So when they file an emergency motion to block the report, they aren't making a legal argument to a neutral arbiter. They are giving a cue to their teammate. They are saying, okay, we won the election, now help us bury the bodies. And this pattern extends beyond just the courts. Look at his tax returns. For years, he fought all the way to the Supreme Court to keep them hidden, claiming he was under an audit. It was a lie. There was no audit preventing their release. He fought them because they showed he wasn't the billionaire business genius he claimed to be. He fought them because they showed the truth. Look at the perfect phone call to Ukraine. He tried to bury the whistleblower complaint. He tried to hide the transcript on a top-secret server, a server reserved for covert operations, not political blackmail, to keep it from the public. Do you see the thread?
Every single time Donald Trump is faced with accountability, his first instinct is not to defend himself with facts. It is to hide the facts. It is to use the machinery of the system, whether it's the DOJ, the classification system, or a loyalist judge, to throw a tarp over the evidence. And the most insidious part of this pattern is the gaslighting that follows. Once he succeeds in hiding the evidence, he turns around and uses the absence of that evidence as proof of his innocence. It is a circular logic loop that would make your head spin. He blocks the witnesses from testifying and then says, see, no witnesses. He blocks the report from being released and then says, see, they had nothing on me. He is banking on the fact that the American public has a short memory. He is banking on the fact that we are tired. He thinks that if he can just keep this report sealed in Judge Cannon's court for a few more months, the world will move on. He thinks he can rewrite the history of the last 4 years to make himself the victim rather than the perpetrator. And let's be honest, he has reason to believe it will work. It worked with Mueller. It worked with the first impeachment. He has escaped accountability so many times that he feels invincible. But this time is different. This time, the evidence isn't about a phone call or a shady business deal. It is about the fundamental security of the United States. It is about nuclear codes and war plans. The Smith dossier isn't just a political document, it is a crime scene photo of our national security apparatus. By filing this motion, Trump is admitting that the pattern holds. He is admitting that the Playbook of Silence is his only defense. He is showing us in real time that he cannot govern if the truth is known. He needs the darkness. He needs the seal.
And that brings us to the most terrifying realization of all. If this is what he is doing before he even takes the oath of office again, if this is how he uses the courts when he is technically a private citizen, what is he going to do when he controls the entire Department of Justice? We aren't just watching a legal motion, we're watching a preview of the next 4 years, a presidency defined by suppression, by secrets, and by a judicial system that bends the knee to one man instead of the Constitution. So where does this leave us? If Judge Cannon grants this motion, and let's be honest, her track record suggests she is already drafting the order,
What happens next? We need to talk about the end game here because this is bigger than Donald Trump. This is bigger than Jack Smith. This is about whether we are going to continue to live in a country where the truth matters or if we are going to slide into a reality where the truth is whatever the man in power says it is. If this report is buried, if it is sealed in a vault until the year 2075 or shredded into oblivion, we aren't just losing a document, we are losing the historical record. Think about the precedent that sets. We are establishing a new rule in American politics. If you commit a crime and you are powerful enough to delay the trial and you are popular enough to win an election, you don't just get to escape prison, you get to escape history. You get to scrub the hard drive of the national consciousness. That is an authoritarian fantasy. That is George Orwell's memory hole brought to life in a Florida courtroom. The Smith dossier is never released. Donald Trump gets to write the history books. He gets to tell future generations that the Department of Justice was corrupt, that the FBI planted the evidence, and that he was a martyr. And because the actual evidence is locked away, there will be no official record to contradict him. The lie becomes the truth simply because the truth has been outlawed. And make no mistake, this is exactly what they want. They know that information is power. They know that an informed public is the only check on tyranny. Why do you think they are so obsessed with perpetuating unlawful investigations? Because investigations bring facts to light. Facts create accountability. And accountability is the one thing Donald Trump has spent 78 years avoiding. But the stakes go deeper than history. This is about the safety of our democracy right now, today. If we don't know what happened at Mar-a-Lago, if we don't know specifically what documents were taken, who saw them, and where they went, how can we possibly trust the judgment of the commander-in-chief? We are about to hand the nuclear codes back to a man who, according to the indictment, left them on a stage in a ballroom. We have a right to know the extent of the damage. We paid for this investigation. You paid for it. I paid for it. Jack Smith didn't work for free. The millions of tax dollars spent uncovering these crimes belong to the American people. The findings of that investigation belong to us. It is our property. For Judge Cannon to step in and say, no, you can't see what you paid for because it might embarrass the president-elect, is a theft of public property. It is a seizure of the truth. And this is where the danger becomes existential.
If the judicial system agrees to hide evidence to protect a political leader, the judicial system ceases to function as a branch of government. It becomes a protection racket. It becomes a subsidiary of the executive branch. We are watching the checks and balances dissolve in real time. The legislative branch? They are already falling in line. The Supreme Court? They gave him immunity. And now the lower courts are being asked to act as his personal PR firm. If this motion succeeds, it signals that the takeover is complete. It signals that there is no institution left in this country capable of saying no to Donald Trump. So what do we do? I know it feels hopeless. I know it feels like the walls are closing in and the gaslighting is winning. But we cannot give in to the fatigue. That is their weapon. They want you to be tired. They want you to say, oh, well, he won. It doesn't matter anymore. They want you to scroll past the headline about the emergency motion because it's just too exhausting to care. Do not give them that satisfaction. We have to remain vigilant. We have to demand the release of this report. We have to support the journalists and the watchdogs who are fighting to unseal these records. We have to keep the pressure on Congress, even if it feels like shouting into the void, to demand oversight. Because the moment we stop caring about the truth is the moment we lose it forever. Donald Trump is terrified of this report. He is panicked. He's desperate. And that should tell you everything you need to know about its value. He wants to bury it? Fine. That means we have to dig. He wants to hide it? That means we have to shine a light so bright that no judge, no lawyer, and no executive order can keep it in the dark.
The case may be dismissed, but the verdict of history is not. And that verdict depends on us seeing the evidence. The emergency isn't his, it's ours. The emergency is that the truth is being held hostage, and we're the only ones who can demand its release. So pay attention. Watch Judge Cannon. Watch the docket. Because the next few weeks aren't just about a PDF file. They're about whether we still live in a country where the president works for the people, or if the people are just subjects in the kingdom of secrets. I know which country I want to live in. What about you?